Okay, ready to go? All right, good morning. Welcome to DerbyCon. It is wonderful to see you all again. My name is Ed Skoudis. Thanks, Dave, for that great introduction. Folks, the people who put DerbyCon together work tremendously hard. It looks like everything is just so seamless and wonderful here, but I mean, occasionally I get to see them sweat a little bit behind the scenes. It is impressive what they all do, what Dave does, what Aaron does, and so forth. So let's just give them a round of applause again. They take this family thing really seriously and not only take care of the speakers, but also the attendees. It's just fantastic. Now, for those of you that have seen me present before, like maybe here last year, you might remember that I had an introductory slide of myself where I had a little bit of command line kung fu, and I'd use a shell like, say, bash, and I would grep through and cut a line out of the Etsy shadow file so I could pull up my GCOS field, and my GCOS field had all this information about myself. But given the recent bash unpleasantness, I thought I should try another piece of software, and I went with Internet Explorer to introduce myself, because nobody ever finds vulnerabilities in Internet Explorer, right? So anyway, here is a SSL certificate that describes me a little bit. I'm a pen tester from a company called CounterHack. I'm a SANS instructor and course author for SANS Security 504 and 560. Got a couple of books out there. I also run the NetWars and CyberCity projects, and I'm a man very thankful to be here at DerbyCon. Also, the certificate you'll see was issued today, and it expires today, so we should get on with the talk. All right. So I'm going to do a presentation that is very humbly titled, How to Give the Best Pen Test of Your Life. Okay, what's the motivation of this? How many people here are pen testers? Raise your hand if you are a pen tester. Okay, if you're not a pen tester right now, raise your hand if you've done a pen test at some point in the past. Maybe, all right, cool, good, good. If you're not a pen tester, I hope the ideas and tips that I'll give you in this talk will be useful as you interact with pen testers and can help motivate and inspire them. If you yourself are a pen tester, I hope to give you some ideas and tips for improving your craft. Think about it. We as pen testers work very hard to try to help an organization improve its security stance. We're kind of given the best years of our lives to do this activity. And I was thinking through a talk for DerbyCon, and I thought, well, what tips and tricks can I pull from some of the best pen tests that I've had an honor of working on and to offer those tips up to other people? The best pen tests of my life. In fact, I consider myself very fortunate to have done 2 pen tests, just 2 in my whole career of 17 years as a pen tester. Just 2 pen tests meet the criteria I'm about to give you, okay? Just 2. I had the honor of doing one a few years ago when I was working with InGuardians, and then I did one last year at CounterHack working with Josh Wright and Tim Medine. But I looked at those pen tests thinking, are there certain ideas and tips and tricks that I can take from those 2 pen tests that were just the ultimate rush of my life and apply them to all of the other pen tests that I do? That's what this presentation is about. It was also inspired by a book and a presentation series that Alan Paller did back in the 1980s. It was 1983, he released a book called How to Give the Best Presentation of Your Life. It's fascinating, I learned a lot from it, and I thought, could I map some of its ideas and precepts into doing penetration testing? Now, this book is out of print, but it was hugely interesting and informational for me. All right, so let's get started here. The pen tester's role. For those of you that do pen testing day in and day out, I know sometimes it's easy to fall into this mindset that you're there as a final checker, right? They've done all this development work, they've done this implementation work, they've done this deployment work, they've done this operational work around it, and you get to come along and you pen test it over 2 weeks or 1 week, or dude, can you finish it in 2 days? And you're like, okay, they're looking to check a box to say, yes, we got our pen test done. It's a compliance-oriented thing. Try to get out of that mindset. Don't think of yourself as, I'm the guy who gets to check the pen test box once I've done a pen test. Instead, think of yourself in a more magical and mystical way. You are the very vanguard of attackers hacking into these systems. That's what you are. You might be the very first people to have put these systems through their paces. Now, of course, for some of us as pen testers, you know you're not the first person to hack these target machines, right? They're out there. They might have been out there for a week or a month or 8 years, and somebody else has already hacked them. But still, you're the one that gives them that professional touch, and use your precious opportunity well. I've been thinking about the pen test industry and where we stand, and some of you may have heard me refer to something called the really crappy pen test before. I've been talking about it for years, and I hate it. The really crappy pen test, the RCPT, is the pen test that isn't really worthy of the name pen test. It is merely a vulnerability assessment. And if you've heard me talk over the last couple of years, you've heard me rail against it. That's fine, that's good, but I want to go beyond that today. Just thinking about the pen test value spectrum that we have. And put different points on here. By the way, I found one of these little antique meters online, and it had the word elite right on the meter itself. And I thought, well, I should add under that pen testometer. This is a level of quality that you would have in different kinds of pen testing. And the really crappy pen test, the vulnerability assessment that is half-baked, that isn't worthy of the name pen test, we'll give that a 0. Okay. Next, the high-volume pen test. I put this one up at 20, and I used to erroneously dismiss these pen tests as unimportant. And I was wrong, quite honestly. In fact, sometimes, maybe you've heard me talk about this, I would refer to them, the organizations that do this, as pen test puppy mills. Right? You know, you go to the puppy mill and you get the little doggy and he's kind of sickly, but it is a dog. It's a dog, right? And here you go to the pen test and it's not maybe super high quality, but it is a pen test. It's a pen test. The reason I was wrong here was in dismissing these things is that these are the most common pen tests that we do. We shouldn't say, oh, those are bad. We don't do that. We want to do something better like the high-value pen test or the ultimate pen test. Instead, we should say, how can we as an industry dial up the high-volume pen tests to make them even better? Because most of our management and most of the rest of the industry, when they think about pen tests, think about that at 20. And if we could bump that sucker up to 22 or 23 or 25, we'll have done a good service to the industry. That's what I'm here today to talk about. Now, Paul's Security Weekly podcast. How many people here listen to Paul's Security Weekly? Raise your hand. Cool. Awesome. Episode 300 had a panel. Dave Kennedy was on the panel. I was on the panel. Weasel was on the panel. Ron Gula was on the panel. And we were discussing how to add more value into pen tests. You can hear it. It's archived online. It's one of those, 200 episode or 300 episode where they just broadcast for the whole day. But anyway, you can jump right to our part if you'd like. And we talked about some of the aspects of pen testing to try to bump it from the really crappy pen test through the high-value pen test, through the high-volume pen test to the really high-value stuff. And what I want to talk with you about now, though, is this ultimate pen test, sort of pen test nirvana, the pen test of your dreams. And I'm doing this not so that the perfect can be the enemy of the good, but instead, the perfect can influence the good to be even better. That's what I'm here today for. All right, so let's do a thought experiment. What would the best pen test of your life look like? Right? And you might say, dude, why are we messing with this? It's a waste of time. No, think about it this way. First, you may have the opportunity at some point in your career to do a pen test like this. As I mentioned before, I've had this opportunity twice, and I'm very grateful. I would love to get this opportunity again, but you never know what might happen. The second reason to do this is to think about what you can learn from your perfect pen test, the platonic form of pen testing, to make your day-to-day pen testing even better. So let's envision pen test nirvana. What do you think pen test nirvana looks like? You're sitting there hacking, maybe you got your fingers on the screen. Halle Berry's in the room next door doing who knows what Halle Berry does in the room next door. It's like swordfish, and that's what it's like, right? Maybe you're thinking this is a perfect pen test. Yeah, you're kind of laying on the beach, thinking about ponage, and that's the perfect pen test, right? Okay, that's it. We're done. Any questions on that? No, that's not what I mean. When I'm talking about the best pen test of your life, I'm talking about a pen test that is designed to give fantastic value to the target organization, one that gives them insight about their security stance and how to improve it. It's technically deep. It's beautifully executed. You're given the pen test of your life. Have you ever done one of these? When you're done, you're like, dude, that was beautiful. I am so fortunate for having been able to participate on a pen test like that. If you haven't done one, you should try to steer your career to get to one like that. You want to do something that's just plain great for the pen test team, of course. We want to be happy with what we've done. But most importantly, for the target organization itself. Within the target organization, you want to deliver value to the CISO. You want to deliver value to the security team. But the most important group for you to deliver value to is the operations team. I saw a presentation by Tony Sager many years ago. He was working at the NSA at the time. And he did this presentation, it's about 4 years ago now, and he was talking about red teaming and pen testing. And he said he's read a lot of red team and pen test reports, and there's a foundational problem with them. And when he said this, my first thought was, no, I don't do that. And then I thought about it for a minute or two, and I thought, I do exactly that. Tony's 100% right, I am wrong. And it's this. He says when you read pen test reports or red team reports, they are written by pen testers or red teamers to impress other pen testers or red teamers. And this is the wrong audience that you're writing for. If you want your results to be effective and useful in the target organization, you could write something for the CISO, that's fine, that's your executive summary. You could write something for the security team, that's nice and good. But if you write something for the operations team, your results will be more meaningful in implementation and support over time. Your most important audience to affect change in the organization with your results is the operations team, so they can operationalize around your findings. You've heard a lot about DevOps, right? I mean, it seems like the people in the DevOps community have a lot of papers, they have a lot of conferences, they tweet a whole bunch. DevOps, the idea is let's develop our software in coordination with the operations teams so that we can have better supportable software. It's a beautiful concept. What I'm suggesting to you here is the pen test analogy of that. And that is pen test ops. Let's conduct our pen tests, and most importantly, couch our findings so that they help the operations team do their job better. So what are the ingredients for this pen test nirvana we're thinking about? Well, you need a great project. You want a great team working on this. It's important to have sufficient time to do these. These are not things that can be turned around in a day or two. Maybe budget, good resources. Here's a tough one, the political will in the target organization. If the target organization doesn't want the pen test or doesn't want a pen test that finds anything, it's going to be hard for you to provide a lot of value. And finally, you're going to want meaningful results. Meaningful results. And what I'd like to do is talk about each one of these phases and then talk about how we can make it practical in our pen tests. Now, some of you out there might be thinking of the Pen Test Execution Standard, PTES. It provides some fantastic information and advice about how to do really high-quality pen tests. Have you read it? Have you read it recently? They add a lot of new stuff to it periodically. Nickerson, DJ Slurp himself has contributed tremendously and spearheaded the project, but there have been dozens of other contributors. I will sometimes look at the latest version of the Pen Test Execution Standard for inspiration. Just to say, oh, look at this. This is a really cool idea. This is another nifty idea. I could apply this way or that way. And I recommend you do as well. All right, so let's envision our project. If you look at a lot of pen tests, especially these high-volume pen tests, they're focused on attacking servers. Oh, see if you can hack into this server, maybe because it's a PCI server and the payment card industry data security standards require that it be pen tested. We need to expand beyond that, though. Instead of just testing servers, let's also test desktops, client-side attacks. Let's attack browsers, apps, whether they be web apps or maybe apps on mobile devices. Let's attack the data. In most organizations, the data is one of the most important things. Also, the infrastructure on which it resides, identities of the people. We can incorporate some social engineering here and do attacks against the people that are included in our scope. And also, it'd be nice to have some physical security stuff here. The ability to get into a building you're not supposed to be able to get into, maybe some lock picking or key impressioning. And we'd like this to be associated with multiple different technologies. Look, you could do your ideal pen test against one kind of technology in one infrastructure. But I find these things get a lot more valuable if you incorporate across these different technological platforms, such as the operating system, the web apps, mobile apps, network devices, and in wireless. 802.11, yes, wireless LAN technology, that's fun to hack, but let's escape its confines and look at things like Bluetooth, or Zigbee, or Z-Wave, or maybe even custom wireless protocols, where you do things with software-defined radio for that. Maybe throw in some great hardware hacking, like bus sniffing, or JTAG analysis, or firmware, or more. All right, well, what about your team? Let's think about the team for this. You want a great team of awesome collaborators. Right here, I've got the A team, right? You need Mr. T to help work on your ultimate pen test. Multiple people. I find teams of 5 are pretty cool, maybe 6 or so. If you get too big, if you have 8 or 10 or 15 people working on the pen test, it's hard to keep everyone focused and it's hard to coordinate across the different people. I like 5 or maybe even 3. And you want the skill sets associated with what we just described. I mentioned hardware and OS and so forth, but there are a couple of additional skill sets we should bring in here. Rapid attack prototyping through scripting, exploit development, social engineering, yes, business impact analysis. This is a really useful skill to have in your pen test so that you can express the meaningfulness of your results. And finally, report writing. Do you like writing reports? Do you like writing pen test reports? Who here does? There are a few that do. I'm not among them. People ask me all the time, do you like writing pen test reports? You talk about what should be in a good pen test report. Do you like doing that? No. My response actually is, I like having written them. Right? When I'm done with a pen test report, hey, that's cool, but when I'm working on it, I am a miserable mess. Additionally, you want to have respect and friendship among the team members and keep the egos in check. All right, so what about available time, budget, and resources for this ultimate pen test? Well, the answer is we want a lot of all of those things, right? Lots of money, lots of time, that's what we want. But how practical is that? I mean, we're under tight pressure for budget and time. Get this pen test done. It's got to be less than $7,000, and you have 3 days to do it. And I'm going to give you some ideas and techniques to try to expand that by providing additional value. Another possibility is you might be able to call in some help. Here we have good old InfoSec Taylor Swift on the $100 bill. Political will. The target organization should want a pen test that is meaningful to them. Something that may imply they have to change their operations. They might have to change their architecture. The idea here is you're going to be impactful. Also, you have to have the appropriate support in their management organization, like a CISO, as well as the security team. And as I mentioned before, your efforts in earlier pen tests can help you win the motivation for doing better pen tests for that organization down the road. So you might start out with, say, a high-volume pen test. You do this pen test for the organization, but you put in some extra time, you put in some extra effort, and you produce a higher value result than they've ever seen. Maybe next time around, you'll be able to increase your budget and increase the amount of time you have to give them even more results. You try to get yourself into a virtuous cycle here. And let's face it, you want meaningful results. If you want to do the ultimate pen test and you get to the end of this project and you haven't pwned target machines, it's going to feel pretty bad. It's going to feel pretty limiting, right? What are you going to recommend? Recommend that they keep doing what they're doing? So you want pwnage. So how can we ensure pwnage? This is a scene from The Matrix here where Morpheus pwns Neo, right? All right, so with that brainstorming of that would be a really cool pen test, sign me up for one or two, let's think about how we can map that in, the ideal of that pen test, to some practical things that we can all do in our pen tests every day. And I'm going to break this down into these 5 areas. Collaboration. We talked about our A-team of 5 or 7 pen testers. What can we do practically, though, if I've got a pen test with 2 people on it? Or maybe 1 person. How can I make that more real and better? Or reporting. I mean, I'd like to have all kinds of time for my reporting, but how can I make that practical and real? How can I get meaningful results? How can I ensure pwnage? How can I build management support and understanding? And so forth. We'll start with collaboration and staffing. Some of you guys work for organizations that do wonderful collaboration in your pen tests. Maybe you have some sort of chat server that you all log into and you spend the day interacting with target systems and then brainstorming ideas in your chat channel. That's fantastic. You do this in real time, kind of creating a hive mind. By the way, those are actually pictures of my brain that are interacting with each other. All right, so cool. All right, so that's ideal, but what if you're in an organization that doesn't have 5 collaborators working on this given pen test? What can you do practically? Well, real-time interaction via chat. Do not dismiss this. You really should do something like this among, say, at least 2 pen testers for a given project. Sometimes we'll see people that put stuff on a wiki. That's nice and good, but it's not as interactive. I recommend maybe you install some sort of infrastructure, maybe an encrypted chat infrastructure with Jabber or encrypted IRC or Silk or something like that. This really goes a long way. In addition to your real-time chats, though, I recommend you still set aside time, maybe a half hour each morning or maybe an hour each morning, where the collaborators, maybe just 2 people working on the pen test, can interact with each other on the phone. Actual human voice-to-voice, what did we do yesterday? What are we going to do today? Let's brainstorm through our findings so far so that we can try to build onto them. So in addition to real-time chat, don't think the real-time chat supplants the need to have this phone call, but instead they work together very well. You should use a coordinating tool and databases to help do this. There's a tremendous tool released in the last year or so by Fishnet Security. It's called Layer. It's for pen test collaboration. It can import the results from multiple different kinds of tools. It's fantastic stuff. There are also other tools that we rely on all the time, like Armitage and Metasploit, Metasploit Pro or Cobalt Strike, that have collaboration capabilities as well. You should spend some really good time thinking through how you collaborate on your pen tests today and make that better. That'll be some of the most efficient bang for your buck that you can get in doing a pen test. How do we collaborate more effectively? If your current collaboration model is simply sending things back and forth in email and dumping stuff into a wiki, you can do a lot more and a lot more efficiently. All right, now what about the pen test. And some of you guys do this in very high volume pen tests where you're the only pen tester working on that project. You're all by yourself. What can you do there? I recommend that you have still one collaborator. But Ed, there's not resources for the one collaborator. I've only got enough time billable on the project for just me. I got 8 hours a day for 5 days. What should I do? I recommend that you find another collaborator in your organization and give them a half hour or an hour of your day. Maybe you'll have to eat that extra hour on your own, but you will be a much better pen tester here. You have that one collaborator that you have on your daily call in the morning to start out the pen test, and that collaborator may be multiplexed across multiple projects. So each of you fine gentlemen might be working on a pen test, 3 or 4 of you, and we have another person be the collaborator that is brainstorming with you for, say, an hour each day. You say, Ed, that is fantasy land. We don't have enough resources to have a single pen tester multiplexed across all these different projects. What can we do? We're just maybe 2 pen testers, each assigned solo to a pen test. You guys are each other's collaborators. So you spend an hour a day collaborating with this gentleman, working on his pen test. He spends an hour a day collaborating with you. You will get much better results. It's going to be more fun doing your pen test. All right, what's ideal in reporting? Here's what I'd like. In fact, when I scope out some of these projects for myself and my team, the guys often will default to this. They say, okay, we're going to do this pen test. We're going to do it over the space of 7 days. Let's have 7 days of reporting there. Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? It's like a fantasy world. So an ideal pen test, you'd have just as much time to write the report as you would to, well, do the pen test itself. And I put together this sort of theoretical pen test here. The ultimate pen test starts on September 1st, runs for 2 weeks. Oh. And then after that, you have the reporting phase for it, which runs another 2 weeks. And then after that, of course, you have a party, right? That's going to be one expensive pen test. This, as wonderful as it might be, is impractical. So what do? Practically, how do you create good pen test reports? You work on the report during the pen test. Now, some of you are nodding your head saying, well, yeah, of course that's what you do. Do you really do it? Really? Seriously? You should. I know it sounds frustrating or hard. You'll say, but dude, I'm like ponying boxes. I'm having fun. I'm interacting. To have to stop and write the report, oh, that's going to make my pen test stuff not as exciting. My response is, so what? Overall, it's a better way to live. You're going to deliver more high-value results. Have you ever been working on a pen test report and you get like deep into that report and you get stuck because you're like, oh, I don't know how I went from point A to point B. My notes aren't detailed enough. Or I just noticed something. When I got to this point in my pen test, I realized that there was something else there and I missed it. I wasn't able to take advantage of it during the test, and the test window is now closed. I'm in the reporting phase. In fact, that ideal pen test where you have the pen test followed by the reporting almost guarantees you're going to have that circumstance where you discover something during your report that you're going to want to follow up on, and it's too late. So write your report while you do the pen test. I recommend you set a metric for yourself. Whenever I have something that I don't like to do, what I'll do is I'll take this thing I don't like to do, and I slice it up into little bitty pieces, and I do one of those little bitty pieces each and every day. And that's what I do with my report writing. Do you remember in The Princess Bride, when the Dread Pirate Roberts had the iocane powder? You remember this, right? Yeah, he had taken a little bit of iocane powder, something that will kill you dead, and just did a little bit each day to build up his resistance to it. I think of report writing as iocane powder, right? So you do a little bit each day. I recommend that you try to write 1 or 2 pages of your report every day. And if you haven't finished that, do it. Now notice I give you, I personally think you should do 2 pages per day. But maybe it's just 1. You say, but on day 1, I don't have enough information to start putting stuff in the report. You do have enough to start the introduction, to start the overview of your pen test. You can do a page or 2 even on the first day. And then as you get more meaningful results, you can put more in there. Use a template for your findings. A lot of this stuff is wonderfully templated. There's some fantastic stuff in the pen test execution standard for different techniques and ideas that you've used. Of course, you should give it credit if you use that as part of your template. I'm working on a project next month. I've had several volunteers who've offered to help with this project, including Chris John Riley, as well as Robin Wood. We're going to do a sample pen test report that adheres to all of the different ideas and techniques that we're describing here. So we're going to produce that in the month of October, and we're just going to release it publicly saying, look, here's 3 guys working together. Here's an example report based on these precepts. Also, you should get screenshots during your test. Have you ever done a pen test where you've got this wonderful finding, you nailed it, you're writing up the report, say a few days later, and you're like, darn, I didn't get a screenshot. Or the screenshot that you got doesn't really map to the text that you just wrote around. Oh, get your screenshots during the pen test itself. And make sure you focus your screenshots on the real action. I read a lot of pen test reports. I read the pen test reports that I create, that my team creates. I read pen test reports in association with my expert witness work. I work on large-scale breach cases, and we look at a lot of pen test reports. I've read some of the pen test reports of some of the people in this room, and I see some things in there that are so awesome and so good, but I also see a lot of really crappy pen test reports. And one of the things that makes a crappy pen test report crappy is the screenshots are horrible. You'll see this giant screenshot, like maybe 1024 by 768, or even wider than that, and it'll say, look, the system's vulnerable. And you look at this screenshot, and I can't see how, what is this telling me? Zoom in on the action, put some arrows, circle some things, annotate your findings. It will make them more lively. Now, how much detail should you include in your report? I personally believe you should put enough detail in there so that a skilled pen tester could replicate your work. They know the tool, they know the technique that you've done. You don't have to put in command by command, but instead the highlights so that somebody with your level of skill could reproduce what you've done. And as I mentioned earlier, focus your recommendations on helping the operations team to better operate. I've talked to a lot of pen testers in the world about this, and they've said to me, Ed, I'm a pen tester. I'm offensive. I don't know how to do this operation stuff. If I knew that, I'd probably be on the operations side. And my response to that is, I'll say to them, well, you're a smart guy, right? And they always say yes. We're pen testers after all, right? You're a smart guy, right? Yes. You should become better at operationalizing around the defenses that would block you as a pen tester. It will make you a better pen tester, not only because you'll provide more value, but you can become even cleverer in getting around those defenses. All right? Ideally, in your pen test, so we're back to the pen test perfection here, no false positives, right? False positives are a time waster. They also hurt your reputation, but they are better than false negatives. We at least got that going for us. But still, if you have a pen test report that is loaded with a bunch of false positives, that's going to hurt your reputation. It makes it more difficult to get a high-value pen test down the road. So ideally, you verify separately every single finding. This is the ideal. Unfortunately, at scale, in a lot of pen tests, this is impractical to validate every finding that your vulnerability scanner gave you. In fact, you might even go further and have an exploit for every single exploitable vulnerability that you have. That's going to get expensive. Maybe you develop ones where you don't have it. This is time-consuming and costly, but it's our ideal. What is more practical? In practicality, limit your false positives. Verify all of your critical findings and high-risk findings. Mediums and lows are nice if you have extra time, but the critical findings should be validated in some other way than merely, my vulnerability scanner told me you have this. How can you validate this? There's a lot of possibilities. One is actually log into the target system. Maybe if it's a Linux machine, you could SSH and look at its configuration. Maybe if it's Windows, you could use various Windows command line tools like the reg command or WMIC. Log in and look at the settings. You say, but I'm going to need login capabilities for that. Yeah, you will. You might ask for that as part of your pen test scoping. Or maybe you could script up a check using the Nmap scripting engine, or maybe Metasploit framework, or Scapy, or Python. Script up a check that will look at the specific settings. This is one nice thing associated with some of the vulnerability scanners. It's, for example, if you look at Nessus. Nessus, with its language for creating the scanning plugins, you can read how the plugin is actually doing its check, and then either manually reproduce what the plugin does, or come up with an alternative way of measuring the same thing. If you do create a script that measures, though, for this particular vulnerability, release it publicly to the community. Give it back so the rest of us can build on top of that work. Or maybe you use a second vulnerability scanner tool for verification. All right. Next, we get to our ideal here of management support and understanding. In our ideal pen test, management understands the pen test, they support the activity. The security and operations team eagerly await our findings. They're so excited about this pen test. And there's unicorns involved. There's also rainbows. Maybe there's little birdies flying around. There's songs playing in the background. This is wonderful. It's also our ideal. How can we more practically steer in this direction? I'm not telling you there's going to be unicorns and rainbows, but how can we get better buy-in and support from the target organization? First, to help gain support, early on in the pen test, strike a deal. Here are words that I've used in pretty much every pen test that I've done over the last decade. I'll be talking to maybe security personnel or maybe even operations personnel, and I'll say, look, I'm a pen tester, and actually I'm here to find flaws in your environment. I admit that, that's true. But you probably know your environment better than I ever will. So I'm giving them that. It's true, right? And you probably know about some security issues in your environment. that you haven't been able to get the resources to be able to deal with. So use me. I am a vehicle that can get your management's time, attention, and resources to help improve your capabilities in securing your environment. Just use me. This has gone a long way in sort of diffusing this. When you start a pen test, on the operations side, there's this sort of inherent conflict. They're like, what are these scary pen testers going to do? They're going to find some of the stuff that I'm concerned about or trying to hide. You need to bridge that gap and become their ally. You should also actively avoid embarrassing them, because if you embarrass them on this project, the next one is going to be even harder for you to do. You want to support them. It's a mindset of having communications flow early on and daily debriefings with target system personnel so there's no surprises, so that they know what you're doing in their environment. Another thing that you can do to help foster this is spoonfuls of sugar, right? Mary Poppins, spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Every pen test report that you write should include at least one positive finding, maybe more. Now, sometimes you really have to dig through a devastated mess of security flaws to find something good, but you should do that. This little spoonful of sugar shows that you're acting in good faith, you were happy or impressed with at least one thing that they did. There's got to be something there, and this will help the whole rest of the report to go down better. And frankly, what these are is they're an investment so that your next pen test can have more action, can have more results in the target organization, and can give you more time and resources. Here we've got the Lego movie, right? Where we had the good cop, bad cop. Well, you need to play the good cop. I was on a panel with H.D. Moore a few years ago talking about high-value pen tests. And I remember H.D. and I had a little bit of a debate on this panel. I was talking about the importance of having positive findings and to be a good cop. H.D. responded saying, there's always a good cop. He says, somebody needs to make these people cry. And he says, I'll be that bad cop. And I said, that's good. I mean, look, you're right. You can do the good cop, bad cop routine. But I'm going to focus on the good cop, at least for part of my pen test results, because it'll make my bad cop routine much more effective. All right? Cool. Another practical thing here. You need to learn their risk vernacular. I know that might sound kind of silly or, just ridiculous, but different organizations consider and talk about risk in different ways. And you need to think about the words, the phrases that they use. What makes for a meaningful result for them? I was just reviewing a pen test report last week that was written by one of my team members, and it didn't have this in there. He was talking about some vulnerabilities that he had found in the organization, said these are vulnerabilities, somebody could hack them, and that was that. And I said, well, what is the impact of that? What does this organization care about? Is it their brand? I mean, for this organization, brand was everything. So let's talk about the potential impact to the brand. Or some organizations, frankly, just worried about losing money. Or there's a variety of other things. Maybe government oversight. The last thing they worry about is additional scrutiny if they were to be breached. Or maybe it's lost market advantage. Last week on Twitter, there was some interesting results that people were tweeting about. The idea that Google might bump up your search engine results if you're using HTTPS as opposed to just plain HTTP. So people were commenting saying, so your SEO results might be enhanced if you use HTTPS. So better security, not because you want to be more secure, but instead you want to have SEO positioning. Look, I'll take whatever I can get, right? And if that argument works for the given organization, I will use that one. You're not using SSL for these pages. You should, because Google will treat you better when people search for you. Oh, we're in, right? Or maybe it's a concern about safety. A lot of the organizations that are focused on infrastructure or things like utility companies, safety is the big thing for them. And talking about how your findings could impact their safety, that's the thing that's going to get you meaningful results. They might not care about their brand. They might not care about money. Some of the utility companies, they get a guaranteed profit on top of the rate base. You talk about losing money, they don't care. But instead, if you talk about safety, oh, they're optimized around safety, right? Maybe it's an impact of personal pride or personal liability. I'm not talking about spreading FUD to them. Instead, I'm talking about understanding their risk vernacular and communicating your findings to them in that way. There's a lot we could all learn. I'm constantly learning in this area myself about how to express this effectively. And there's been some really good work being done by the I Am the Cavalry folks. They're working hard to come up with ways that we can communicate to industries like automotive or medical or some of the utility companies like power, and how to communicate risk effectively. And we can learn from that and apply it in our individual pen tests. I understand the I Am Cavalry folks have a room that they're going to be doing some workshops here with communications for the media, as well as understanding and better expressing risk. Next point, guaranteed pwnage. How can you ensure guaranteed pwnage in your pen test? One option. For ideally, you do 0 day, right? You've got an arsenal of 0 day that you've spent the last several years acquiring, and you just apply that in the organization. Oh, you don't have that arsenal? Well, you write your own 0 day exploits, right? You get your pen tests funded to the point where you could spend weeks or months creating 0 days for every finding that that's hard too. In fact, Samil Shah did a presentation at NullCon earlier this year. Samil's a fantastic guy. He was talking about what things were like earlier in his career, say 12 years ago, versus what they are now, especially focused on one part of his presentation, 0 day. And he says, if you go 12 years ago, 0 day exploits were an individual effort done by one person, maybe over the space of a week, and it would have 3 to 6 months shelf life before people applied patches to it. So people wrote 0 days for their pen tests. Unfortunately, increasingly, 0 day is now a team effort involving a lot of folks that are very specialized on this, maybe 2 months up to 12 months development time, with 24 hours to a 10-day shelf life before the patches get deployed. Now, there are exceptions to this, right? I mean, shell shock or heartbleed were wide impacting 0 days, and I've been thinking a lot over the last 24 hours about how this whole 0 day stuff is evolving. But finding shell shock for an individual pen test is unlikely. What we've got is these very complex, big pieces of software with all kinds of different subtle attack surfaces, and finding something like that is very rare indeed. It's happened twice this year. It will continue to happen, I believe, at a rate of maybe once or twice or 3 times per year, but you can't count on that for your pen test. So don't rule out 0 days. Of course, you should use them if you have them, but what if you don't? First thing, strongly believe this. Every pen test you do should have client-side exploitation included in it, and should include some sort of spear phishing or social engineering related attack. Always include them in your default proposal, your default statement of work. If you're an in-house pen tester doing pen tests for your organization, establish that as your de facto norm. We just do this because it's the dominant attack vector today. They're attacking client machines. If you do a pen test that doesn't look at the clients, you could argue you're not doing a pen test. You're doing a part of a pen test, right? See if they get dropped. You might include this in your default stock standard proposal, and they say, no, we don't need this. This happens to me all the time. Say, oh, no, Ed, you don't understand. You're doing a pen test for PCI DSS, and you just have to do the card environment. And there's no clients that we ever run in the card environment, so therefore, no client testing. I get so frustrated at this. And then sometimes you think, PCI DSS 3.0 is coming, right? Right? PCI DSS 3.0, 2015, it's going to be widely rolled. I just read it again last week. I read it again this morning. It does not, even to this day, mention client-side testing. But it does say that you have to test the card environment inside the card environment as well as from outside the card environment. Now, how is somebody going to hack into that card environment? Most likely, they're going to pop a client outside of the card environment and then ride into the card environment through that client. So maybe you could use PCI DSS and its discussion of pen testing outside the card environment against the card environment to do some client-side testing. You need to make a business case for giving more value in your pen test by doing this client-side stuff. Another possibility for guaranteed pwnage is to use something that's called the 0 day card. Haroon Mir did a presentation a couple years ago at 44Con, where he talked about structuring a pen test so that if you get stuck, if you've got nothing exploitable, you say to your customer, we want to play the 0 day card. And the 0 day card gives you access to a machine. The idea is you're modeling an attacker who could create his own 0 day. Or you're modeling a circumstance where you got caught unaware that there was this new thing just introduced yesterday on the internet and people are hacking with it. Shell shock, right? That's what you're trying to model. Try this. Discuss with them the idea of doing a 0 day card. Unfortunately, I've tried it. It's very hard to convince them of that. I've had them say to me, look, hacker boy, you got to figure out your own way and we're not going to give that to you. Instead of the 0 day card, which is worth offering up, how about this? Could you just model for me a user who runs an application? I'll give you the application, we'll have a user run that, and see what I can do from that point forward. Because face it, users are going to run various applications in your environment. So let's model that. Now you've taken the creation of a 0 day, or the artifice of the 0 day card, and you've converted it into something where AV evasion is what's important to you now. Or maybe you say, give me some sample accounts. Give me some sample accounts, and I'm going to see if I can break out of the confines of those sample accounts. I've had tremendous luck with that last one. Give me a sample account as a nobody user in your environment, very simple access, and I want to see if I can break out. Mark Baggett did a presentation called Antivirus No Thanks last year, and it was an inventory of different AV evasion tactics. In my citation section at the end of this presentation, I have a link to that one, because it's kind of hard to find on your own. So you should definitely read that presentation. It's tremendous work. Another practical piece. How can you ensure ponage of the target organization? Well, you get into one system, maybe because they gave you an account. Maybe you've escalated privileges there. Or maybe they've executed an application for you, or you've spearfished a user. You now need to pivot mercilessly through that organization, jumping from system to system to system. How could you do this? One thing you could do is just log in from machine to machine. On Linux or Unix, maybe SSH, maybe use ps-exec on Windows, or there's some great pivoting options in various tools like Metasploit Framework with MSF Route, or the Meterpreter has its port forward capabilities. Metasploit Framework offers a SOX proxy. There's all kinds of great stuff there. You can also do pivot port relays, like with Plink or Fpipe or Netcat relays and more. You could VPN from system to system, bouncing and bouncing and bouncing. Of course, you always do this within scope and following the rules of engagement. I very often ask for an increase in scope when I'm pivoting between systems. And I want this in writing. I'll send an email to them saying, look, I got into one machine. I've seen other systems nearby that are currently outside of my scope, but I think I can better understand your business risk if we expand the scope this way. I do this frequently in pen tests, and it allows me to provide more value. And then I've got a special one for you. Check this one out. On Windows 7 or later, you could build a port relay using the NetSH interface port proxy command. This is awesome. What this command will do is it will cause a Windows 7 or later machine, including things like Windows 2012 servers, to listen on a port. When traffic arrives, it will forward data to another remote host on another port. You're like, oh, that sounds kind of like a port relay, like Plink. Yes, but it's built in. And the best part of this, it does IPv4 or IPv6. And in fact, the same command can connect an IPv4 TCP listening port and send data out to another machine on IPv6. That's awesome. So you could have a TCP connection going through one of these things from IPv4 to IPv6. Do you ever wonder if Microsoft loves hackers? You ever just kind of contemplate that? I mean, years ago, we used to be able to say, Microsoft loves hackers. I mean, look at the stuff back in 2004 with all those 0 days and stuff. But lately, you think, does Microsoft love hackers? I look at NetSH interface port proxy and say, yes, Microsoft loves hackers. Don't forget to delete these port relays when you're done, though. And it's another NetSH interface port proxy del command to delete it. Also, if you get access to a Windows client system, you can use NetSH WLAN to look at its wireless interfaces or even pivot wirelessly. Tremendously useful stuff. All right, so in conclusion, we've talked about different techniques for taking some of our high-volume pen tests that we do a lot and bumping them up to maybe a little more high-value pen tests by envisioning this ultimate pen test nirvana. I've tried to structure the practical advice here in a way that you can do it without spending a lot of extra time or a lot of extra money. But I do admit, it will take some extra time to do these techniques, but they'll make your results better. We were working on a pen test. I remember it was late last year, and this is what I consider one of my ultimate pen tests. The report was written by Josh Wright with some input from Tim Medine, and they sent it to me, and I got to review this report. The report was about 150 pages long. This was a big pen test. It lasted over a couple of months. And I looked at this report, and it was gorgeous. It was the best pen test report I'd ever written. I made recommendations for them to change various things, and I actually had over 200 recommendations for changing. And Josh Wright contacted me back. He's like, dude, why are you bleeding all over my report? You admit it's one of the best pen test reports you've ever seen. I said, yes, I want to move it forward and make it even better. Yeah. All right. Now, I have a list of citations here for you. I saw a presentation by Haroon Mir. And in this presentation, Haroon was talking about pen testing. It's called pen testing, you're doing it wrong. And he said, one of the things that we need to do more in this industry is to give citations of the work on which we've built. So I figured if I'm citing some of Haroon's work, I should at least follow his advice and do the citations here. So anyway, here's some citation about the various items that I talked about. All of the talks are fairly easy to find with a simple Google search, with the exception of the first one. So I gave you the URL for the first one. And that brings us to a conclusion. Are there any questions? Do we have time for questions, Dave? No. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. It's great talking with you.